Alright, hi class, welcome back. Now we are going to talk about, or our next lesson would be History of Psychological Testing, Part 2. So there's the Part 1, so I do suggest that you just watch it. It is also uploaded in this YouTube channel. Now let's go to Part 2. Alright, so like what I've mentioned in the previous PowerPoint presentation, the history of psychological testing started in the Chinese era, and then it gradually developed until the Americans also use use testing to choose their employees for public position. Now let's talk about the early experimental psychologists. So as we define experimental, so in experimental psychology is a kind of research which uses a control group uh, to define or differentiate the results. Also, it has independent variable and a dependent variable. So where did it all started? So now let's start with the early 19th century. So the early 19th century scientists generally interested in identifying common aspects rather than individual differences. So compared now, people are very much interested on what makes them individually unique. But in the early 19th century, the scientists think that being unique is actually different. So they are focusing more on what makes an individual or what is common among individuals. So differences between individuals was considered as a source of error, which rendered human measurement inexact. So like what I've mentioned a while ago, if an individual back then has a different qualities, it was considered an error because they focus more on the what is common. Okay, so um, so again in early 19th century they focus on the commonness of an individual. Now let's go to the early experimental psychologists back then. First, we have Johann Friedrich Herbart. So he's a mathematician. So he used mathematical models of the mind, founder of pedagogy as an academic discipline. So pedagogy is actually a teaching method that is still used now and explored until now. So he believed that the mind can be actually computed mathematically. Now we have Ernst Heinrich Weber. So he made use or measured sensory thresholds, just noticeable differences. So as you can recall in your introduction in psychology, sensory thresholds are the minimum thresholds that an individual can be felt. For example, if you entered a room that is so hot, what is the smallest, just noticeable difference that made you feel that? What is the most yes the heat in the room? Okay, so that's just the noticeable difference. Okay, so he explored more on that. And then next we have Gustav Theodor Fechner. So he's also a mathematician. So in here, he used mathematics of sensory thresholds of experience. Founder of psychophysics, considered one of the founders of experimental psychology. He also, together with Weber, they formulated the Weber-Fechner law, first to relate sensation and stimulus, considered by some the founder of psychometrics. So, if Weber formulated the idea of just noticeable difference, Gustav Fechner then identified that there is a mathematics or a computation there that makes an individual feel the noticeable difference. Okay, so that's called the Weber-Fechner law. So they are the the founders. They are also very, very prominent in the field of stimulus and response. All right. Next, we have also Fechner influenced many prominent psychologists like Wood and Freud. Okay, now let's go to Wood. So Wood, Wilhelm Wood, considered one of the founders of psychology, first to set up a psych laboratory. So in here, they used, or Wood used, physical and human subjects. They are the first one who who created a laboratory for psychology. Then we have Titchener. Titchener is known in the field or the psychology of thought in structuralism. So he succeeded Wouldn't, and then brought structuralism to America. His brain is still on display in the psychology department at Cornell. Now let's go to Guy Montrose Whipple. So he's a student of Titchener's, pioneer of human ability testing, conducted seminars that changed the field of psych testing. APA, or American Psychological Association, issued its first set of standards for professional psychological testing because of his criticisms. So he's actually one of the known critics in psychological testing, and most of his works focus on standardization in psychological assessment, specifically the administration and other kinds of or other different individual differences. So there because of him, he influenced most of some of the psychological assessment, administration, and psychometrics properties today. Next, we have Louis Leon Thurnstone rather, is a large contributor to factor analysis, attended Whipple seminars. Approach to measurement was termed the law of comparative judgment. So Thurnstone here is one of the contributor of factor analysis. So if you're familiar, and I know you will take on the 16PF, so the statistical tool used there, the statistical method used there was actually influenced more by Thurnstone. All right, now let's continue. So in 1805, S. Carroll founded or had this idea of mental deficiency. So John Etienne Esquirol, a French physician, favorite student of Philip Pinel, founder of psychiatry, has founded or coined the term mental retardation. So mental retardation now is not, it's no longer used. It's actually an offense to someone who has it. Okay, today mental retardation is no longer used. So in DSM-5, it has a lot of terms now, okay? Because mental retardation now has a specific name and its criterias. So Esquirol differentiated between insanity and mental retardation. So what's the difference between insanity and mental retardation? So in Filipino term, and insanity is, sorry for the lack of term, but insanity is called now as, in Filipino or in the Philippines, baliw or wala sa katinoan. Okay, again, I do apologize about the lack of words, but that's insanity defined. Simply defined today. Okay. So the difference, just to make the difference between insanity and mental retardation back then was called idiocy. All right. So, or these are the slow learners. Okay. So one of example of insanity is schizophrenia. One of the example of mental retardation would be global development delay disorder. Okay, as you can see, insanity is different to mental retardation. So that's what Iscarol found out. He differentiated insanity is actually different to mental retardation. Okay, so another example of insanity and mental retardation would be insanity are those who are people who were who can who gets confined in psychiatric wards, and mental retardation, these are people who does not have a physical defect, but they are the ones who spend a long time in the special education classes and many more. Okay, so that's the difference, and that's the greatest contribution of Escarol. All right. So in insanity, he stated that insanity had a period of normal intellectual. All right. So in your abnormal psychology, you will define you can get to define what is insanity. Okay. So like for example, in schizophrenia, when a child was born, he a lot of people would not detect that that child would have schizophrenia by the age of 18. Okay, because schizophrenia often, um, first symptoms often started at the age of 18. And okay, especially if that's a male. So there's a period there from age 1 to 18, that person or that man, yes, or that guy, that individual has a period of normal intellectual. So they actually can exceed in school, they are the smartest in class, they are the most talented. But when they reach the age of 18, the symptoms of schizophrenia started. So that's what Iscarol is trying to say. That insanity, there is a period of normal intellectual. Alright. Next, Esquirel also contributed that functioning many degrees to mental retardation. So he also defined or explored and explained rather that mental retardation is not just simply as idiocy. Okay, there are levels of mental retardation. So if you're going to check off in abnormal psychology, there we have the global development delay, autism spectrum disorder. Though uh, they are not psychiatric disorders. Okay, but they are considered before under the mental retardation. That's why it's called mental retardation, because it's under mental. It's mental capacity wasn't able to develop like others. Okay, but they are beings that can function, but can function intellectually, but not normal as others. Okay, so he identified that there are degrees. So that's normality to low grade into idiocy. So he also attempted to develop system to classify people into this many degrees, but found that the individual's use of language provided the most dependable continuum. So one of his bases to measure mental retardation was actually the language. So as I can recall, uh, if a child was able to make at least phrases, so that that child is near normality. But if a child wasn't able to make phrases, only sounds, that's closest to low grade idiocy. So Esquirol used language as a basis to measure mental retardation. Okay, so again, that's Esquirol in 1805. He became interested in mental deficiency. All right, now let's go to Seguin. Seguin. So he's also interested in mental deficiency. So in 1840s, in 1840s he started. He's a French physician pioneer in treating mental retarded persons. Okay, so he's the one who's very one of the psychologists that in physician rather influenced uh, the the special education. Okay, so he rejected the notion of incurably mental retardation. In 1837, he opens first school devoted to teaching mentally retarded children. In 1848, he emigrates to USA, wide acceptance of theories, and in 1866, experiments with physiological training of mental retardation. All right, so as you can see, Seguin here now believes that a people or a child with mental retardation can be trained. Actually, up until now, if you ask someone who specializes in therapy with therapy with students with special needs, they will say that with training, these children can uh, hopefully can socialize like the others and can cope with classes as well. Okay, so that's what Seguin explored back then, that mental retardation can be trained. That's why he opened schools. That his concept and idea is still used by now. So in here, he used sense training, muscle training is still used today. All right. So that's the goal, or that's the job of our physical therapists, occupational therapists, especially specializing in special education. And he leads to nonverbal tests of intelligence, so Seguin form boards. So for him, he then recognized that there are some individuals that are okay but cannot able to speak. So from there, he was able to make Seguin form board. All right, now let's go to intelligence testing. All right, so the intelligence testing was first started by Alfred Benjamin. So 50 years after Esquirel and Seguin in 1905. So he is a French society for the psychological, okay. So his study of the child urged French ministers to develop special classes for children who failed to respond to normal schooling. Ministers required a way to identify the children. So he is the one who encouraged the government, the other officials, to actually make a special education. All right, so let's continue on Alfred Binet. So Alfred Binet first intelligence test is called Binet Simon Scale of 1905. It's a 30 items of increasing difficulty. It is a standard administration, same instructions and format for all children. Standardization sample, created norms by which performance one child and can be compared with other children. So this one actually is the Binet Simon scale is in 1905 is created basically for children. So it is standard and used to measure only intelligence. But I heard that there's a lot of criticism with this one. So let's go and let's check on the next one. All right. So the intelligence testing by Alfred Binet is a standardization sample for 50 normal children from age 3 to 11 years old, some mentally retarded children and adults, and in 1908, Binet-Simon Intelligence Scale. So more items, greater reliability, better standardization sample, that's 300 children. Introduction of mental age. All right, so like what I've mentioned a while ago, Binet was known for the Binet-Simon scale. But before that, like stated in here, Binet himself made a standardization sample of 50 normal children ages 3 to 11. So he was able to identify that some are actually mentally retarded, and both in children and in adults. So that's why in 1908 he created another test with Simon that has a consistency, that is reliable, and has a great norm, that is 300 normal children. And with this, he was able to identify the concept of mental age. All right, let's continue. So Alfred Binet's legacy. So in 1911, Binet Simon minor revision in the Binet Simon intelligence test. Then he died. Coleman Binet revision extended testing downward to 3 months of age. So that Coleman was able to explore and expand the norm of the test. Okay, so just to clarify, norm meaning the normal average performance of the test in a given sample. These are the participants. Okay, so in 1912, Coleman expanded the norm downward to 3 months of age. So imagine that. From the initial, that's 3 to 11 years old, he expanded until 3 months. So just to check on the intelligence of the individual. So in 1916, Louis Madison Terman and Stanford colleagues revised Binet's test for use in the United States, more psychometrically sound. So in here, they were able to introduce the term IQ, or intelligent quotient. So with Terman and the Stanford colleagues revising Binet test, was able to get the formula for the intelligent quotient. So that's mental age over chronological age, and that's the equivalent would be IQ. The mental age would be the level of your mental processes. Okay, so this can be poor, excellent, superior, and many more. Okay, that's the mental age. That would be for others. This is this can be measured in your performance in school and many more. Chronological age is different to mental age because chronological age is your age. Like for example, if you're 18 years old, that's your chronological age. But your mental age can be higher or lower than your chronological age. So, for example, one of the student, one of a student, for example, Claire. Okay, Claire. Claire has a chronological age of 18, but her mental age can be 18 or 17. Okay, so if a person was identified that his or her mental age is lower than his or her chronological age, there might be symptoms of mental retardation. All right. Okay, but if a person has a chronological age, for example, an 18 years old, and a mental age that is greater than his chronological age, that person can be intelligent in an above average level. Okay, so that's when it started the term IQ. All right, now let's go to group testing. So group testing is actually used way back then during the World War. So it was first started by Robert Yerkes. Okay, so Robert Yerkes, the American Psychological Association president, organized a committee of psychologists to help in the war effort, because back then there was difficulties in placing armies. So that's why he encouraged a group of psychologists to create a test to place the armies. Okay, so the first one would be Army Alpha. So this is the first group intelligence test given to recruits in the U.S. Army. It consisted of 8 subtests measuring verbal, numerical, and reasoning abilities, as well as practical judgment and general information. Okay, so that's the first one. So this one focus on the verbal part. Okay. And then this one would be Army Beta, test that did not require reading and could be used with recruits who were illiterate or non-English speaking. So as you can see, the difference between Army Alpha and Beta is that the Alpha has a verbal part, and then the Beta has no verbal part because it's designed for those who are illiterate and non-English speaker. All right. So with that, they were able to identify the difference, and that was the first one, or the first group testing conducted. Now let's go to Autist. So Autist published his group intelligence scale, the test that had served as a model. All right. So Autist first one who published the group intelligence scale. And then we have E.L. Thorndike, another important American pioneer working at Teachers College at Columbia, produced an intelligence test for high school graduates. So he was first known, Thorndike was known for the intelligence test for high school graduates. All right. So that would be probably the second part of the history of psychological testing. So there's the last part 3. So I do suggest if there are questions about this lesson, my chat box or our class chat box is open. So I do suggest that you keep on rewatching this video if you have any concerns, and let me know if you have any questions. So that's it for part 2. See you on part 3. Thank you.